Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at client-side data fetching in Next.js. As you know, in Next.js you've got two different types of pre-rendering methods. Static site generation and server-side rendering. So these have their own ways of getting data into your application. So the third way is to use SWR to get data into your application, and this will be on the client side. SWR means stay while revalidate. It's a HTTP cache invalidation strategy. It is not recommended that you use the usual methods of data fetching, like on the client side, using useEffect and having state variables. So that's why they've come up with a new hook which integrates well with the static site generation and server-side rendering methods. So let's see quickly how it sort of works. Okay, so in this example here, we have our page component, which is posts, and within there we're setting our data a constant to a data fetch from a use SWR function. So in the use SWR function, we have a URL, which is the endpoint, and we have a fetcher function. This is going to be your data fetching function, like Axios or fetch. And then you have an object with feeding in the initial data. So the initial data will come from the getStaticProps component. So this basically gets your data for your page at build time. So this when you create statically generated pages, this will get the data for the page at build time, and that data will be passed down into your page component as props, as you can see here. So in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to use SWR hook with getStaticProps. So hope you enjoy it, and please remember to subscribe to my channel. Thanks. Okay, so to save some time, I've already set up a standard Next app using the usual npx create Next app, and I called it my blog, or you can call it anything that you want. So I've run that already, so don't need to do that. So just get it. So I've got the standard index.js and the hello.js there. So if I go into the browser, already run it, so it's already running. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a page in the pages folder. So I'm going to create one called blog, and I call it blog.js. Okay, so for our blog page, we're going to have an export default function. We're going to call it blog, and then we're going to return some JSX and just have a message there saying welcome to the blog. So if I save that and then go into the browser, and yeah, it's running now. So I'm just going to go over the things I'm going to do. So we're going to create an endpoint called post. We're going to hard code it with the following data, which is so this is just a JSON object with posts and with some content with title and content. Okay, so that's the structure of the JSON that we're gonna have as our endpoint. Okay, then we're gonna add the SWR data fetch hook to get the data to the client side. Then we're gonna create a statically generated page using getStaticProps, and then we're gonna use SWR with getStaticProps. So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a endpoint using this data. So for that, what we need to do is just copy this piece of code. And as you know, we can create endpoints in the Pages API folder. So as you see, we've already got hello.js, because if you go in the browser and you go API, hello, and you get the JSON response that's already there. So we can copy this and then create another page called post.js, and we can copy this in there. So we're gonna replace. So this is just a HTTP response, standard HTTP response function there. So with the status 200. Okay, so so all we need to do, we need to just respond with our JSON data. So I'll just delete that, and I'll just copy from there. Just going to copy this into there. So I'll save this, and if I go to the browser and I go to posts, so I get that data back. So that's working. So we've got an endpoint now. So in our blog post, we can create a SWR data fetch hook. Okay, next we're gonna install SWR. Okay, so we're going to terminal, and we're gonna cd into my blog. And it's npm install SWR. So once it's installed, then we can use it. So to use it in our blog component, we need to import it first. So at the top, just import use SWR from SWR, and then in our blog component, we need to first set the URL. So a constant URL equals to our endpoint, which is as you remember, it's API/posts. So we're using that endpoint. Okay, so then we need to use the SWR function. So that the use SWR function returns an item called data and error. So what we do is destructure what it returns, and we extract data and error. So in the use SWR function, we feed in a URL and then a fetcher function, which we're going to write in a minute. So this will fetch our data with an error flag as well. Okay, before I continue, I'm just going to delete this data. It's not part of the code, but I'll leave this for reference. Okay, next we need to write a fetcher function. So this is just a REST call to a endpoint. So what we're going to have it's going to be an async function, and it's going to be called we're going to call it fetcher function, and it's going to have a parameter of URL. That's the argument that we're going to feed it. Okay, within there we're going to have a constant variable. It's going to be a response variable, and that will be a weight on the fetch function, and we feed it the URL. and then in the we're going to return a JSON object from that response. I'll save that. Okay, so we've got the fetcher function. Okay, once the data has been fetched, we can do something with it now. Remember, it's using use SWR, we also get an error flag with it. So the usual practice is we can do some conditional rendering. So we can do a if statement, okay, and test the error flag. If there is an error, then we return a failed to load message. And if there's no data, then we return a loading message. And that should give you a better user experience. So I'm just going to tidy this up. So if I test the application now, okay, so at the moment I've got the welcome message, but if I put in an endpoint that doesn't exist and save that, so it should get failed to load. So it's working as intended. So that's working. So I just change that. Okay, now we got the data in, we need to extract the posts out of the data and do a console log. Okay, so it's going to be constant, and I'm going to destructure and extract the post from data. And I'm just going to console log posts. Now that should get me data. Oh, post is spelled wrong, so posts. Spelled post wrong. So if I go to the browser and do a refresh and make sure and go to console.log. Console. Okay, so I'm getting the data in there. Okay, so that's working. Okay, now we need to render the post. Now you can only access the data after it's passed these conditional checks. So there's no error and it's not loading. So then I can access the data. So you wouldn't be able to access it before that. So something to note. So now we got the data in, we need to render it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to map through it. So I'm going to have a div, and then in curly brackets I'm going to map through posts, and it's going to have a callback function, and I'm going to get a header with curly brackets item and title, and then I'm going to have p element and have item content, and then just going to have a break because I'm going to save this. I'm going to look in the browser. Okay, so it's already updated. Just refresh it here. So it's getting the posts, as you can see here, the title and the content. So this is doing a. So if I do a refresh, you can see the loading quickly flash. So it's doing. So it's going through these conditional rendering. So that's working. So that's how you do a basic SWR fetch on the client side. Okay, now we're gonna do a fetch with getStaticProps. Okay, next thing that we're gonna do is create a statically generated page using getStaticProps. So before we do that, I just want to mention that I've created a mock server on localhost port 309, and so that I can demonstrate this better. So we're going to be using this URL to do the data fetch. So this is going to be an export async function, and it's getStaticProps, and it will have an argument with context. We don't need to use that for this example, but you can get access to things like router and things. So then there we're just going to have a constant for our response, and it'll be an await fetch, and we're going to fetch the endpoint from localhost 3009, which is our mock server, and then we're going to destructure the response, and then we're going to return it as props. So we're just going to do the post. So that should be for that function. Okay, so then so when this page is at build time, and at build time this page will be rendered with the data fetch from this REST call. So so in our page function we will need to put in props there, because that's what it's returning. So this gets fed into our page component. So we don't need to do this. We can comment this out. Okay, so I think we can comment this out as well, because we don't need that for this example. Okay, so it's going to get the props, and so this I'm going to change that to props for this example. Okay, so it's going to destructure it from. So we're going to destructure props and extract posts, and then all this should work. Okay, so if I do save and I go back to our blog, okay, so it's getting the mock server, so we know it's doing it correctly. So now I'm going to change the server mode to running it in production mode. At the moment we're running in dev mode. So if I go to the terminal and just so it's running localhost as a dev server. So I'm gonna control out of that, control, and then I'm gonna do a build. Okay, and I'm gonna do npm run build. Okay, this is gonna do a build, then we're gonna run it as a production. Okay, it's done a build. Now we're gonna npm we're gonna do npm run start. So it's running as a local host at 3000. So if I go into server, if I go into the browser, and okay, so it's running there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I've got the API for the mock server there. So this is the JSON that it's responding with. So I'm just going to put in some asterisks there to make sure that see if it registers the change. So if I do refresh on there, so it hasn't changed. So if I stop the server and do a build again, yes. Okay, so now I do npm run build. Then I do a run start, npm run start. So it should get the asterisk now. So it's getting the asterisk. So this does a data fetch every time you do a build. So, but if I change it after you do a build, it doesn't register it. So this is where we can do SWR together with getStaticProps to update it. So I'm gonna just we're gonna use SWR with getStaticProps now. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to the top and we're gonna uncomment the blocker code for SWR, and we're also gonna change the URL to the mock server. So remember, the mock server was 3009 and localhost 3009, and it was called mock post. Okay, so now we need to we're gonna add in another parameter called well, it's going to be it's going to be options, and it's an object with options inside, and we're going to pass in the initial data as props. So this props will be fed into our use SWR function, and this will be used as the initial render. So this would when you request a page, it will statically generate a page with this initial data. So then we need to also change the posts to data. So we need to destructure data, not props, because we're feeding the props in here. Then we're then whatever this hook returns, we're going to destructure it and we're going to extract the data in error. So we're going to destructure the data there into posts. So this, if I go into the terminal and so it's already running, so I'm going to stop the server and do a rebuild. npm run build. Then we're going to npm run start. Okay, now starting. Okay, so so this is what it's getting. Let me just see what. So in the mock server we got. So we're going to change this to 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we go back in. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what? If I do a refresh, you should get the stale data. Okay, so when I do a refresh, it will have the stale data, but if I focus away and come back, and it changes it. So this is by default, this is how it works. So if I change it again, if I change it to 789,999, and if I go back, and it's got 78999, but if I do a refresh, it will get the stale version. Okay, but if I want to refresh it again, I'll have to go back and now I got 779. So if I do a refresh, puts it back to the stale data. Now by default, this is how it works. So now there are options that you can feed in to the SWR to fine-tune how this works. If you go to the SWR documentation page, there is an options section, and under the options sections you have all the options that you can feed in to the SWR function. Okay, so we've used we've used initial data to feed in the props as the initial data. So there are other options to control or fine-tune the way you want to fetch your data for your application. So by default it has revalidate on focus. So that's what we was doing when we was updating. It wasn't updating on refresh, but if you focus away and come back, it was updated. So by default that's set to true. Now what we want to do is we want to update revalidate on mount. Okay, so that when we do a refresh, it will get the new data. And also on the initial load, it will get the stale data, then immediately get the a new data. So we'll try this and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. So I'm going to go back into my function, SWR function, and we're going to put a comma there, and we're going to reevaluate, and we're going to set it to true. Okay, so now if I change it to XXX, and I'll save, and I go to my, and that's already updated. So if I do a refresh, okay, I have to do a build, sorry. I didn't do a build. Okay, so I need to exit out. So I'm going to do a rebuild, run build. Now I'll run start. Okay, now I'm going to go back into the application. Okay, I'm going to do a refresh. Okay, now I'm going to change the data. Right, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And save. So it's changed it. Now if I do a refresh, I should get the old stale data, then it would immediately change. Okay, see, it's flashed. So to demonstrate that, we can put in a delay there. In our mock server, I'm going to put a delay, and I'm going to put it to around about 8 seconds. Okay, so it will, if I do a refresh now, it should get the old data, and after about 8 seconds it's going to change any minute now. There you go. So if I do a refresh again, you get stale data, and after 8 seconds it's going to change it. There you go. So that's working. So that's how. So this I've changed on the mock server, so it's not part of the application. So I'm running this on a different server. It's just another React Next application. Okay, to summarize, if you want to test this out, remember to do a build, then run start. Don't do it in a development mode. Then you can't test it properly, because whenever you make changes, it will automatically do a build. So run it as run build and then run start. And also, for the options, you can go to the site, SWR document site. And remember, the options that we use are initial data, which you feed the props for that, and revalidate on mount. And this enables you to revalidate the data when you refresh or reload the page. So by default, it's revalidate on focus is true. So this means it will update when you go to another site and come back, or go to another tab and come back. So to test this out, you need to create a mock server. So to run a mock server, you need to enable calls, and you need this block of code to handle the requests and inspect it, and then you can do the usual fetch. Then you can do the usual response with the status quote. So, and I'll just put in a wait there. So you can get this on the next site, how to do calls. Okay, so if you like this, please subscribe to my channel, and see you soon.